India's GDP growth rate is near a two-year low. Inflation is above the RBI's comfort zone. The Indian rupee is under pressure, trading near record lows against the US dollar, and the global geopolitical environment remains uncertain. It is in this complex backdrop that Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman will present a record-breaking 8th consecutive union budget. Hello and welcome to Budget Banter. I'm Shireen Bhan and I'm joined by my colleagues here in New Delhi and in Mumbai. And over the next 1 hour, we will put the spotlight on what you want from the union budget. So do post your questions and queries to us on our YouTube page. Recommendations, comments, suggestions, everything is welcome. But before we begin the banter, CNBC TV 18's Dia Epan spoke to people like you and me to find out what they anticipate the budget to do this time around. Let's take a look.
Is there something that you have in mind that you want to see this year?
I'm expecting some benefit for the middle class on priority, basically. And since I'm working in the travel sector, probably some benefit for the travel sector, like some GST benefits.
The government should be taxes less on at least daily routine items. Right. If you are going to gold and all, we don't care. But we are middle class person, so we need to my daily budget going very high. So we want to do some reducing to daily items, product taxes should be addressed.
Going forward, the government should focus very less on freebies and more on welfare. They should reduce these freebies and put more where it is needed.
They should focus on medical and education for the poor people as well as rich, whoever.
I think it's extremely hard to save in this economy. So I'd like to see some provisions where I can afford to save a bit more. So maybe that's with lower income tax slabs or because I just want to be able to pay my electricity bills, lower petrol rates and all of that.
India is now getting a lot more tourists and travelers. I think a better development and infrastructure for travel and tourism would be nice.
Already काम धंधा नहीं है और ऊपर से इतने टैक्स पे टैक्स एक तो ऑलरेडी आदमी कोई चीज़ लेने जाता है उस पर भी टैक्स दे रहा है ऊपर से गवर्नमेंट भी टैक्स मार रही है तो कितने टैक्स भरेगा आदमी.
Give some tax relief to people who don't make that much money. You should have slabs ranging till 50 lakhs until 30 lakhs at least. I think you guys should knock off the taxes.
Well, that's what the Aam Aadmi wants Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman to deliver. And as I pointed out, budgets are always complex and challenging, and this one is going to be particularly so for all the factors that I pointed out. So some, like us here in Delhi, have chai and biscuits and chips with us, and all of our colleagues sitting in Mumbai have nothing. So that is what at the end of the day the budget is going to do. Some will be left with a little bit more on the table and some will be left with exactly what they started with. So let me introduce my colleagues. It's the band of boys in Mumbai along with Surabhi, Nimesh, Nigel, Prashant and Mangalam. Thanks very much for joining us. And right here in Delhi, it's really the hard-working team of reporters that's been pounding the ministries, the streets to try and get us a sense of what Budget 2025 may in fact have. Parikshit, Sapna, Timsy are here with us. Tax, that's the big word that everyone is keeping a close watch for. But it looks like the budget might bring some good news for the middle class. That certainly is the hope. Sources have told CNBC TV 18 that the government may announce measures to provide some relief to the middle class and increase their spending power. But guys, let's get straight into that. For the benefit of our viewers, North Block, that is the Ministry of Finance. It's called North Block popularly, and we don't have access to North Block. It goes into what is called quarantine. So it's blocked for all reporters, for anybody else besides the budget-making team a month before the budget-making process starts. And it will only reopen once the budget is in fact presented. So it's very hard to get information on what is finally going to be in the budget. So these are all, source-based, educated guesses that we are putting together. But Parikshit, the growth thrust, the employment thrust, that will continue to drive the policy decisions that this budget also takes forward, right?
Absolutely. And, Shireen, this budget is coming in a certain context when you've got low consumption, you've got inflation as a problem, you've got global uncertainty. The sense that we get by speaking to different government departments is that this could be a budget which would be a feel-good budget. It wouldn't upset anyone, and the government would want to ensure continuity in some form. definitely focus on middle class because they need to be given more consumption power, focus on labor-intensive manufacturing sectors, which increases employment potential, increases our exports as well, decriminalization of laws, and simplifying the tax structure overall.
Yes, those are some of the aspects. But, you know, we've been talking about consumption. I mean, every budget discussion that we've had, the number one ask from industry is increase the power of consumption. Let me get Mangalam into the conversation since FMCG is his life. Mangalam, let's talk about the pain as far as consumption is concerned and what industry is telling you and really what the expectation is from the budget as far as consumption is concerned.
So, you know, it's such an interesting thing when it comes to consumption because just in the previous budget, which was the interim budget, it was the time when rural India wasn't doing particularly well. So the hope was that there should be more hands in the money of rural citizens so that they can prop up that. 6-7 months later, because of the inflation that we've seen in urban India and the kind of growth that we've seen earlier as well, it's urban inflation and urban consumption which is under pressure as well. And both of them are extremely important. Why is that? Because rural accounts for 2/3 of volume, urban accounts for 2/3 of sales. So if you want FMCG companies to report volume growth, you have to prop up rural consumption. If you want FMCG companies to drive up premiumization, better margins, you have to prop up urban consumption as well. The good part is that because of, you know, good monsoon, because of, you know, better income in the rural India, you have rural consumption which is picking up gradually. But it's hit a bit of a wall in the urban centers, and that's what we've seen in the numbers as well. So more money in the hands of middle class is something that we require. That's what all the FMCG companies are asking as well.
We were just, Shireen, we just had the manager of Dabur with us on closing. And they were telling us that 1.5% is the volume growth.
Yeah, 1.2%.
You know,
but that's not just Dabur. You know, if you look at HUL, 1% volume growth. Godrej Consumer, absolutely flat.
HUL?
That was, Godrej was 0.
Godrej
HUL was 1%. And we have bunch of companies reporting anemic volume growths, and most of them citing weakness only in urban India. And that's exactly what the real concern is out here. Urban, you know, if the government can somehow put more money in the hands of urban citizens at large in general, then maybe they can go out and purchase some of these discretionary consumption items. And that's exactly what we're looking at from an overall consumption standpoint.
You know, because our memory is so fresh, right, with regard to Dabur, you were talking about that 1.5% volume growth that they got. And they said that they expect things to improve from here on. The markets got excited even with that. So we actually start seeing growth from here on. Markets will latch onto that. You know, I think Dabur is one of the top gainers in the last 30 minutes of trade post those numbers. So it seems there is an expectation out there. And the management also said that they believe that things will improve from here on, Mangalam, right?
That's been the belief for the last 2 or 3
But the market bought it today.
The market bought it today because, you know, these stocks have
also corrected so much.
30%.
The valuation is in their favor.
Absolutely.
Stocks have corrected very sharply.
Absolutely. Look at Godrej after they came out with that quarterly update. And the stock got tanked on that day. And after that, I think it's bounced big time.
You know, guys, but I want to actually ask a question back to Shireen and maybe Parikshit or even Sapna, Timsi, if you guys can kind of chime in. You know, while we have conversations with the market participants all the time, I don't remember in recent memory that every single market participant that I've spoken to has actually said that yes, some personal income tax, you know, leeway will be good. Usually we are so used to them frowning on it, right? Freebies, income tax cuts, you know, you're slipping on fiscal. It's a bad thing. The stock market hates it. But the view from Mumbai this time is it's okay. If you're going to, you know, cut income tax, if you're going to give some help, it's better off. So your thoughts, and Shireen, you know, we remember, I want to take everybody back to 2019, which is when we had the corporate income tax rates cut. So corporate India was given that big thrust to go out there, manufacturing and, you know, basically spurring the economy with the hope that it'll trickle down, it'll help consumption. But a couple of years down the line, I don't know if that's entirely played out. Your thoughts, Shireen, on, you know, what you're hearing and what your sense is on the budget?
And I'm glad that you point out, because if we look at what the budget has done, or specifically how this government has approached even through the COVID period, it hasn't been the approach of putting money in the hands of the people. The government has actually taken a very measured approach when it comes to putting money in the hands of the people, and they've now feel that they stand vindicated, because look at the inflation problem in the rest of the world. We didn't do that. We didn't take that approach in India, and so we were better off when it comes to inflation. So it's been been this, let the government spend on infrastructure, let the government spend on capital expenditure. That has been the way forward. That has really driven growth, and that has kept the engines of the economy going. Now, one of the arguments that the government has presented, Surabhi, and guys, and Sapna, Timsy, Parikshit, we've all been reporting on this, is that because of the elections, there was a pause in government spending. There was no cut in outlay, but there was a pause in government spending because of the election code of conduct. It is now taking time for those taps to come back on stream, and so the expectation is that growth will start to pick up both at the end of the center as well as the state. So I would still be a bit measured about how much we can expect as far as tax relief is concerned, or things like Ficky's suggestion about consumption vouchers and so on and so forth. I would still be a bit circumspect on that. I think we are probably going to see, as Parikshit was also pointing out, much more continuity in policies. But let's address the income tax issue, because, we've seen many people, including, people who are very vocal on social media, and people like Mohandas Pai, saying that this is the budget that the government needs to deliver for the middle class and provide some income tax relief. So let's start with that. Timsy, for the government to spend from its wallet, we need to understand how much the government has in its wallet to start with. So let's look at the tax collection story so far. How much room does the government have for you and me?
Well, as you rightly said, that we need to first see what is available in the pocket to see how much government can actually spend. What is the cushion that the government has to provide the so-called and much asked for a tax relief? When we look at the numbers, it is very clearly visible that the indirect tax side is facing a heat because of the slow consumption that we are seeing in the economy. Manufacturing is slow because people are not buying, and similarly, the impact is also on the services because people don't have that much of money available in their hands. So the consumption power has slowed. So the indirect tax cycle is facing a heat. But yes, when it comes to the
currently on indirect taxes?
Well, when it comes to the shortfall, it is somewhere around 25 to 30%, which is estimated right now, because we see a lot of indirect tax collections coming in with a lag.
Yeah, and we still have a quarter to go.
Most of the indirect tax collections are paid in the last quarter, because we see a lot of customs, excise duties coming in the last quarter, a major chunk of that. But yes, when we look at the cushion, that really is coming from the direct taxes.
Absolutely.
When we see direct taxes, the outlier being securities transaction tax, for example. We've seen that the budgeted target of 37,000 crore rupees is already met, and we still have a quarter to go. Now those collections will come later on, and we've already surpassed that, and that too by a good number. 37,000 crores was the target, and we are already sitting at 44,000 crore rupees. So there's a cushion there. When it comes to personal taxes, almost close to 95% collections are already in. When we talk about the corporate taxes, 90% collections are in. We still have a quarter. People will pay their advance taxes, all the corporates by 15th of March. Then closing will happen, and then the real tax number will figure in. But yes, that direct tax is going to give a cushion, which clearly indicates that yes, there will be a revised estimate, that too an upward trend. And most importantly, as Surabhi said, that till 2019, the clamor was reduce the corporate tax, and an impact of that is visible in the last 5 years with the reduction in the corporate tax rates, the personal income tax collections vis-a-vis the corporate tax collections. Now, they have grown. Personal income tax share has increased by 7%, while corporate tax share has increased by only 4 to 5% in the last 5 years. So when you look at the last 5 years and you see, as you said, continuity, that is going to be the theme.
No, that will be the theme, but that's important, and that's why we wanted the numbers to be put into perspective there on what the finance minister is actually working with. But Prashant, you guys were having a very interesting conversation with Neelkant and a bunch of other market economists. What is the room available for the government? How much is the government? How much does the government have to play with to be able to provide some relief for people like you and me?
I mean, Shireen, if you believe Neelkant, and Neelkant is sort of as good as they come in terms of just the fiscal math and the overall picture, about 80 to 100,000 sort of lakh crores, 80,000 crores to about 1 lakh crores is the room available, according to Neelkant. And on a budget, which is about 54 lakh crores, I mean, that is actually not a very large amount. So you can increase according to Neelkant and others as well, I think it's widely understood you can't do very much. You can't massively change things because there are interest payments. There is defense spend. There are salaries to be paid. So those are all fixed costs for the government. So there is a limited amount of room which is available for the government to play around with. But just one thing, Shireen, with regards to exactly this, right? There is the fiscal equation as well. This is an interesting year because the FRBM, and I think Sapna and Timsy may also like to add, the FRBM mandates that the fiscal deficit as a percentage of GDP, it comes down to 4.5% in FY26. But that's essentially where it stops. When the government presents the budget on Saturday, will they actually present another new roadmap for sort of, taking that fiscal deficit even lower to, say, 3.5% over the next couple of years or so? I think that is the other debate. Yeah. As Surabhi also said, stock markets always like fiscal consolidation. They don't like, they don't like money to be handed out. Yeah. But this time, I think...
Prashant, to be fair, the government has delivered on its fiscal consolidation roadmap. Yeah. Yes, there has been slippage, but by and large, they have stuck to the fiscal consolidation glide path. But Sapna, you wanted to...
I just want to... Very important aspects Prashant has flagged.
Just one thing.
A couple of things that we need to keep in mind now.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I just want to complete that point. What I was saying is the market actually would like it if they do not put out a future roadmap. Enough fiscal consolidation.
They're saying now give some money.
Exactly.
Let people spend and consume so that capex, and Prashant, we talk about private capex not picking up. Well, unless and until demand is absolutely robust and certain, perhaps corporate India is sort of still looking for reasons to start deploying more capacity.
This year 4.8%, next year target 4.5% and stop. And then you basically come down to reducing the absolute debt level. And that can...
Government debt.
Government debt. That is essentially what the FRBM says.
Hey, Delhi is waiting to jump into the
Can I
add debate. Yes.
So excellent points that you have raised, and that's definitely how it's going to be. That is the game plan. So basically, once you have FY26 in fact, even for the current revised estimates for FD, because government capex has been on the lower side. So, there quote unquote, there is an expectation, hope, that they might use some bit of that to better their FD, which is not actually a priority. Even if they're at 4.5%, this is what they have indicated earlier, they have promised, and that is good enough. Next year, next year's number, so this year also if they're at 4.9, it's good enough. And next year is already 4.5. Yeah. The point is that look at how government has used its good fiscal strength so far, or a good cash position so far. They have been doing a very calibrated, very targeted and consistent government bond buyback program. And if you look at some of the rough estimates as of now, in terms of the FY26 borrowings, which are expected to be actually on the higher side because of heavy redemptions, especially in terms of the COVID loans which have been taken.
Right.
So on that front, already around close to 60,000 crores worth of FY26 debt securities, GSECs, they've already bought back.
Right.
Right. So, I mean, so there is a fiscal cushion available, definitely.
Yeah.
But how are they going to use it? That's the whole point. And as Shireen and everybody was pointing out, capex is a priority which this government cannot give up.
And that has been the preferred route that the government has taken. But Parikshit, you wanted to make a point as well.
Just excellent points by Sapna and Timsy and Prashant. But one thing that I also just picked up, when the Prime Minister had a meeting with economists, we hear from sources that there were a couple of economists in that meeting who said that, having a fiscal deficit roadmap and target is good, but slight slippage is fine in the current environment if it helps you to revive consumption and growth. Yeah. So that was just a suggestion from a few economists, but let's see what the government
does. I would like to just add something more to this. So if you look at this year's nominal numbers, obviously GDP is lower, and it's lower by a massive 2.65 lakh odd crore. We all know that all the budget estimates are done on nominal GDP. So they had targeted 10.5, so obviously it's 9.7 now, as per MOSPI. So these are the estimates that they'll be working on.
And MOSPI, for those of you who don't know, is the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation. Sapna's throwing all the finance
statistics and planning implementation.
I just want to say...
But okay, guys, this is the #1 question that everybody's asking us. What happens as far as income tax relief is concerned? Timsy, what are you hearing? What is likely?
Well, what I picked up from my sources 15 days back was very clear. When it comes to the old regime, nothing is going to be changed. Forget it. Government has put that on the back burner. Yeah. When it comes to the new regime, government is cognizant that yes, something has to be done. North Block, in now this sort of a situation, what it does is it prepares the top 2 to 3 agenda points that it wants Prime Minister's office to okay on.
Okay.
And now what are these top 2 to 3 asks that they have put on the paper for PMO to approve? Firstly, move the slabs a bit on the other side, which is the latter half of the slab structure, coming down to, say, something at 15%, something at 18, say,
So
coming
move
out.
15%, move 15 lakhs to 18
yes,
lakhs,
yes.
basically, and that's where, so,
And
so
that
let
could
the
be-
30% start coming in?
Yes,
from an 18
30% need to start at a later stage, maybe at, say, 20 lakhs and above. Similarly, creating a slab in between. So 10 lakh to 20 lakh, which is the heavy loader, which shoulders the major burden for the country when it comes to yielding the taxes. That is where the relief needs to be, because the government feels that a relief in that bigger bracket can actually help boost consumption, because these people are going to buy more services. These are the people who are going to buy more goods. For example, cars. Cars are not selling, and they want the people in this pay bracket will have the power to buy these and then move the manufacturing
that's
cycle.
possibly one of the things that the government is actively working on. But as Timsy pointed out, it will require the Prime Minister's office and the stamp of approval from the highest authority to take that forward. But, you know, Surabhi, let's come to you now and talk about what tax experts make of the possibilities of this slab rejig and what kind of relief we could actually be talking about here.
No, I completely am with Timsy on this. I don't think anyone in Mumbai is expecting anything on the old regime, because it's kind of been, you know, sort of put in the graveyard. And the FMS said it several times that they want everyone to move to a new regime with lower deductions and exemptions and lower rates. Now, having said that, let's also remember that in July 24, the small tweaks and sweetening happened at the lower end of the slabs. I mean, that is when, just to jog everybody's memory back, we moved to a structure of 0 to 3, 3 to 7, and 7 to 10. So that's where these changes happened. And at the same time, standard deduction was increased in the new regime from 50,000 rupees to 75,000. Now, if you're in the old regime, you get 50,000 standard deduction. New regime, it's 75,000. You know, I've been speaking to a lot of people, and again, this is more hope, and maybe Timsy can talk more about this. There is hope. There is a lot of focus on housing, and we all know that when you're taking a home loan, whatever little relief you get, which is also stayed static in time, the principal is part of the ATC limit, which is 1,50,000. The interest is capped at, the deduction on the interest is capped at 2 lakhs. Now, there's a big push from the real estate lobby, even tax experts talk about this, that, you know, it's really housing for all. So why do you want to restrict this to people who've opted for the concessional tax regime or the new tax regime? But I don't know. My point is, if you start, and same applies to, by the way, health insurance premiums. Again, the deductions only there in the old regime. Well, if you start offering this in the new regime, because health is important, housing is important, then what's the difference? So I don't know how they'll do this balancing act. Maybe Timsy, Sapna, anybody, if you guys want to come in.
And this has been much debated, and at least previously the response from the bureaucrats has been, if you want a lower rate, then you have to let go of the exemptions. But there's also been talk about bringing back some sweeteners to incentivize people to switch to the new tax regime.
I agree. I would like to add over here on this. Firstly, let's see what the government has been saying so far. An exemption-free roadmap of reduced rates. Government is not in favor of giving any more exemptions, which is why the two regimes are there. And when, as Surabhi pointed out, the last budget gave a sweetener in the lower part of the tax slabs, government was very clear that only now those who have a home loan would like to stick to the old regime. Others should move to the new regime, and that was the estimate, which to an extent has actually yielded the benefit of moving the taxpayers from the old regime to the new regime. Now, when it comes to the sweeteners, the two sweeteners which Surabhi talked about is something that everyone wants, because traditionally we all were in the old regime because that was the only regime available. We all, at least from the middle class side, they have an aspiration to have a home, which is why having a home loan at a cheaper rate was a concept which got introduced in the economy, and government wants to actually push that further, and which is why that particular sweetener in terms of exemptions and deductions in the tax regime is something that people have been asking for, that should be replicated in the new regime. Secondly, as we started becoming more insurance-linked people, we all have a personal health insurance along with our corporate health insurances. So that again is something that a sweetener can be given. Recently on 24th January, SBI came out with a report, a budget analysis. And in the 3 scenarios that SBI, from the economy belt of SBI actually suggested, the suggestion was, why don't you get back these 2 sweeteners in the new regime as well, so that the money goes out, and yes, we get exemption. We have that sort of a cushion internally within my income, without any change in the tax slab.
Perhaps those 2 can find their way as possible sweeteners and also provide relief for those who are opting for the new tax regime or are in the new tax regime. But, you know, guys, I want to...
Won't that open the floodgates?
Well, it may open the floodgates. We
Down
don't
the
know.
line.
As I said,
No
so far
exemption
they've
regime will be
maintained...
there.
So far they've maintained that we're doing away with exemptions, so one will have to wait to see. But I want to move this conversation to the markets as well, because, you know, there were changes on capital gains. Yes, Prashant, go ahead.
No, all I'm trying to say is, if they, as Surabhi is pointing out, as Timsy is saying, they do nothing for old and they incentivize new, right? One sector to watch out from a market perspective is going to be life insurance companies, because it becomes unattractive. Life insurance is exemption under the old tax regime, and if you don't do anything on for the old and don't incentivize life insurance in the new, and do other things like, for example, taking the tax bracket, starting taxing at a higher rate, etc. So, that's I think about 5 or 7% of the premiums collected are sort of, are dependent on this. That's there was a report to this effect. So life insurance will be one space to watch if this is essentially how it pans out. And on taxes, I just wanted to say on a lighter note, I think Donald Trump in the US is saying, abolish personal income tax.
We had a viewer, right, when we started this conversation.
Only because he hopes that tariffs can replace them, Prashant. So, you know, we'll have to wait to see.
You know, just one point. I was just doing some calculation.
But abolish income tax. Donald Trump, Subramaniam Swamy has been at it well before Donald Trump. So we've had our own advocates for doing away with income tax for very long.
And not to forget, Donald Trump has introduced a regime to make in US at 15%, which India already had, and India has phased it out also.
Go India.
So India has been ahead on these 2 fronts already.
We might bring that back. But Nigel and Nimesh, let's talk about the markets now, because you know, the expectation is, let's leave things as is. We've already gone through a change as far as taxation for the markets are concerned just last year. So let there be status quo. What's the mood, Nigel?
Well, you know, a couple of points, Shireen. I look at the live data with regard to cement as well as steel and how much is being moved via rail. You know, till around 10 days ago, it was actually a negative number if I look at January in comparison to last January. And the total amount of cement and steel that moves via rail is quite a large sum. And I'm taking note of this because it could be close to around 50%. But I'm just looking at the graph 6-7 days later, that graph has improved a little bit. So the need of the hour really is that capex spend, that capex number, because we're going to fall short from a market perspective as of what was budgeted as of last year. But on that low base, we want to see some kind of growth. So Nimesh, I think, you know, from a market perspective, the need of the hour is stick to, you know, that capex spend, need to boost up the economy. And just to be fair, you know, the kind of measures that have come in from the RBI, I was reading a Macquarie note, I think there was a deficit in terms of liquidity, and there have been a couple of measures in that direction. Come February 7th, you're hoping that you'll get that rate cut as well. And there are some measures that have been taken in the recent past that suggest that maybe this budget will be good for the economy and in turn for the markets as well. But Nimesh, what else? You know, I want, you know what I want? Nimesh, I go on talking about these SIPs, some tax exemption. You know, you're putting money in this thing. If you put in your SIPs for the next 4 years, 5 years lock-in, you know, you get some exemption. That's just my wish list.
So again, you know, Nigel, from a market point of view, the biggest thing is, as what even, you know, Parikshit said, it's going to be a feel-good budget. Market only wants a feel-good budget. No negative news or no negative surprise will be really cheered. You know, and simply because we've seen a very deep correction in the last 1 month, right? The mid-cap index, small-cap index down almost 15-18%. Nifty is down almost 10%. So there is a bit of carnage in the broader markets in the last 1 month itself. And now the hope is that budget will bail them out. So I guess, you know, from a market point of view, I think, you know, a lot of investors are waiting for this budget to bail them out. I don't know how much there could be
praying
in terms
for
of
deliverance. That's the last tweet for you. Praying for deliverance, that there'll be a magic bullet or bazooka that Madam Finance Minister will deliver on Saturday.
But Shireen, I want to ask you and the Delhi team is
again, I find this, and we've gone through this exercise for the last 25 years. Every year, the expectation is that there will be big bang reforms. Honestly, I think that we have to also be realistic about what the budget can do in terms of big bang reforms. And I think, we need to temper the expectations. I think as long as there is policy continuity, as long as the promises that you make are actually operationalized. I'll give you one instance for, today we're all talking about DeepSeek versus OpenAI versus India AI and so on and so forth. There was a 1 lakh crore rupee R&D allocation that was made in the budget, and a year down the line, in February, and a year down the line, it has not been operationalized. And here we're talking about, how much money is required for India's AI mission to sort of compete in the AI wars and so on and so forth. So I think if we need execution of the ideas that have already been announced. There was the internship program announced in the last budget. Many of these programs are sort of, still work in progress. But I think the number one thing that, if there is a substantial increase, last time around, there was an 11 lakh crore rupee record capex number announced by the government. If they continue to go at that run rate, I think industry will be happy because let's be clear, that's still doing, the government spending is still running the economy. They're still doing the heavy lifting. What is private consumption at this point in time?
So if you look at the latest GDP numbers, it's virtually stagnant. So whatever lift you have got in the GDP so far...
It's because of the government.
Yep. I mean, they have sizably increased their capex from 6.5 lakh odd crores. They've gone to 11 lakh odd crores. And I don't think in this coming budget, whether the offtake has been lower this year for known reasons because of elections and etc. etc. But I don't think the government is in a mood, or anybody can afford for the government to actually step back. They have to keep the foot on the accelerator. Maybe the pace of growth will come down, as it did in the July budget also.
Correct.
They have paced it up. They made it more calibrated. But to say that they'll go back or something...
No, there's no question. There's no question of the government stepping back.
You can expect a higher number. You can expect a higher number, and a very quick, roundup of some numbers in the GDP internals, which came out on 7 Jan. So if you look at the gross capital fixed capital formation, 33.5% share in the GDP in the real terms in FY23, 33.5. It moved to around 33.8. It's again back to 33.5. I mean, it's just around.
Yes, that, it hasn't changed. It hasn't changed. That's telling you the story there as far as...
Despite the fact that the size of the economy has grown, but
exactly. The share of private capex remains pretty much at status quo for the last...
to add over here, just supplementing what Sapna is saying and what you are talking about. When it comes to capex, definitely the foot on the accelerator is something. And as you had pointed out in the beginning, because of the elections, there was a little pause. And that has had a trickle effect along with the global uncertainties. And now the government, when it comes to the implementation on ground, what I've been picking from my sources is very clear that a lot of these programs are work in progress. They could not see the initial push because of elections. And now government is very clear that the capex has not picked up to the extent, which is why expenditure has not happened the way they had planned. But this cushion also will now help them to shift a lot of those programs in this year. Again, when it comes to Manrega jobs, when it comes to a lot of infrastructure building, a lot of cement will get sold, a lot of steel will get sold.
But that's the hope, and that's what Nigel was pointing out to.
And yes, that's what government sources tell me, that this will also create a lot of jobs where there was a pause.
But also let's keep in mind that the rural economy apparently is doing slightly better than the urban economy.
That was the point. That was the point that Mangala
So
was
the
making.
requirement of jobs under Manrega actually has come off.
Yeah, because it is a demand-based scheme, and that was the point that Mangala was making, that the pain is shifted to urban as opposed to rural. Guys, we need to take a break, but a last very quick point from Bombay before we take a break.
So Shireen, from you and from the team in Delhi, the other ask from the budget, especially this year, this time from the market point of view is, will there be anything, with regards to attracting FDI and FI capital? That's something which a lot of experts have been talking about, and whether there could be anything that this government can focus on.
Okay, should we respond to that after the break?
Let's do it after the break.
We'll get a biscuit here in Delhi and come back to you after a break. Stay with us. You're on the budget banter. There's a lot more coming up once we return with our team. Well, the budget countdown has begun. Tomorrow is the day that the economic survey will be presented, and we will present the budget along with the Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman live here on CNBC TV 18 on the 1st of February. We've, of course, been talking to all of our editors on what we're hearing about what the budget could possibly have. More importantly, we've been focusing on the pain points being addressed or being expressed by industry and being expressed by the Aam Aadmi, by citizens like you and me, and talking about the possible measures that the budget may in fact unveil. Just before the break, Nimesh, you were talking about what can the budget do as far as FDI is concerned,
exactly.
And is that likely to be a focus?
Yeah, that's what a lot of market participants want to listen to. Whether they will focus, whether they will do some schemes, they'll attract some FDI capital, or they will somehow do something for the FI investors as well. So that's a hope.
So Nimesh, if I could just add to this, because tax comes into the picture as well. Now, whether or not they do anything for FPI specifically, I don't know. FPIs have been sort of crying about this for a while, that 12.5% capital gains is a lot when there are hardly any capital gains. But I'm leaving the FPI part of it aside. On FDI, Shireen, what I've been hearing from the tax world is that the rate of income tax for foreign companies is still higher than the 25% average corporate tax rate that Indian companies pay. So I don't know, if a foreign company decides to set up big manufacturing here in India and decide to commit big dollars to the ground here, whether they can get some sort of a concessional tax rate or not, maybe that could be something to think about. Because anyway, TIMSI has been reporting, even for Indian companies, I suppose that 15% tax rate for new manufacturing companies, that is supposed to come back in some format, right, TIMSI?
Yeah.
Well, yes, that's what sources had indicated to me middle of January also, that a concessional rate for setting up new manufacturing units, as we saw. And now we have Donald Trump actually talking about the same scheme in US. So that could put a pressure on the government, just giving that additional push to, yes, let us go back and reintroduce the concessional corporate tax regime.
Which was just phased out in 24.
Just here, March, we already saw 1 year extension on that because the government felt that, yes, due to the COVID lag, due to the 2 years that were lost during the COVID time, the scheme was launched in September 2019. It came in and immediately we had COVID. So to that, they tried to give a cushion of 1 year of extension. Earlier, it was supposed to phase out in March 2023. Then they tried to delay it by 1 year to make up for the losses to the COVID. And now the buzz that is there, or what sources are indicating, and as per the industry demands also. Remember, all of this is not just purely what government is also getting as a feedback and then reacting to it.
We're possibly likely to see the concessional scheme for new manufacturing units, whether it's a 15% rate or an 18% rate, may find its way back in this budget. But, other important aspects, Sapna, and this has to do with the insurance FDI, that bill is likely to be brought in the budget session as well. There was also the promise of overhauling the FDI regime itself that was promised in the last budget. Direct tax overhaul, but that's likely to be more on the lines of simplification, not rate changes.
Absolutely. So picking up first with insurance, this has been since July, August last year that we have been talking about it, expecting it to happen. So the expectation was that probably in the winter session the government would have brought its bill, but that has not happened. We're given to now understand that obviously budget session is in two parts. So post recess, 100% this FDI insurance cap is likely to be raised.
Right.
But there's one just small little point that I'd like to mention here is that even under the existing FDI cap for the insurance sector, probably the investments are not to the extent which are required, or they're not really, touching or crossing the threshold. Probably what the government here is attempting to do is give a signal to the foreign investors. Exactly what we're talking about at the moment, apart from, of course, making a host of facilitations internally for the domestic players.
As she says this thing, that the second half of the budget session could be crucial when it comes to, again, signaling to the domestic players. There could be a new law on the income tax side, which is expected. Government in the July budget actually laid a clear roadmap that come the next February budget, the full budget that we are going to see, where we are likely to present a simplified direct tax regime, replacing the age-old Income Tax Act of 1961, which is too complex, way too complex. Too many additions have happened over the years. And this time it is morely on simplification of language, bringing in certainty that, yes, what we spoke about, we are getting it. Similarly, on the manufacturing side, almost 200 plus exemptions under the custom duties are right now under review. That was also a roadmap laid by the finance minister in the July budget, that could come in and again, it would need some approvals from the parliament. And as Sapna pointed out, the second part of the budget session, which meets after the recess in March, that is going to be a crucial one to look out for these changes.
We've got questions coming in. Ayush Khandelwal writes in saying, will the budget introduce a subsidy for higher education loans? There was some measures that happened last time around, Parikshit.
One definitely can't rule that out, and I hope there is a good amount of support for education, Ankush. The reason why I say that, in the last budget, Shireen, the outlay was 1.26 lakh crore overall for the education sector. We're expecting a higher outlay this time around. Last time in July, the finance minister had announced that there will be financial support for loans up to 10 lakh for higher education, direct e-vouchers to 1 lakh students, annual interest subvention of 3%. My sense is, and what we get to know is that considering the big focus on AI, semiconductors, skilling in future technologies, it could be higher education in these sectors which could be given an impetus.
Okay, so we'll have to wait to see what the finance minister does decide to do. Another question, Disha Gala writes in saying, what are the big measures the government can announce to reel in inflation? Sapna, on the supply side, any measures expected?
Well, not really as part of the finance minister's budget speech, so to speak, so to say. And also, let's keep in mind one thing, it's basically not the headline inflation, which is a very big worry at the moment.
It's food inflation.
It's basically food inflation. That too has been trending down. If you look at the last couple of months, or like 3 odd months, though of course the food inflation rates are much higher for rural India rather than urban India. So that's where the action is required. But then again, the trend is coming down.
And it's not so much an issue as far as the budget specifically
absolutely
is concerned.
But on the macro level, this is something that
the macroeconomic stability
and government has been addressing it continuously.
Absolutely. Sarath Rajkumar writes in saying, year after year we talk about tax reforms and job creation. Will budget 2025 address these long-standing issues, or will it be more of the same? I'm going to throw this to all of you in Bombay to respond to.
Let me try and get a quick dipstick going, Shireen, from the Bombay panel here. We've discussed, FDI, FPI, we've discussed CapEx, we've discussed the big budget numbers. But, quick quiz. If the budget does not address consumption at a middle mass level, it's always the fag end or maybe the super rich. If it doesn't address the bulk of the middle India consumption, will the market fall or not? Prashant?
Look, it depends on the size of this, whatever stimulus or whatever we're calling it, right? Is it meaningful? But if there is nothing, look, this is, I think my Shireen has done 25 budgets. I think 20th or 21st from. I think, my lesson is keep expectations low. The key to happiness in stock markets and
not answering.
It's not because I think it's there is very little leeway actually. If you ask economists.
That is the message.
Keep expectations low.
Yeah, I'm telling you, because we and this time particularly expectations are running low, and I think it's a good thing. Expectations are low.
If I've been hearing everybody say no, consumption.
No.
Okay, Nigel.
I'll tell you my take. I think the markets will look at that capital expenditure number. That is the most important number according to me. That is on this, on February 1st.
Capex.
On February 7th, they will look at the RBI to hear
RBI.
about, what kind of liquidity they can inject. These are the two most important triggers.
We'll learn to live with it. If there's no tax cut,
and
we'll
me
learn
and
to live
Prashant
with
are
it.
great friends, and but I think the stock market participants are expecting something from the government.
I agree with
they
that.
don't
Yeah.
want anything negative with regard to the taxation. And if we get these three, that is no tinkering with regard to taxation of on the stock markets, getting a good capital expenditure number as well, and we'll get that liquidity infusion, from the markets will see a solid rally from here in the near term. In
Got
the
it.
near
So
term,
even if
that's on the
there
wish
is no tax cut,
for me,
the
capex
market
spend is most important. Capex is
Got
most
it.
important.
ये biscuit का growth कैसे होगा?
very
मैं
quickly.
एक चीज बताता हूँ, let me just say one thing. You can pencil in the Nigel. Problem is not the capex number. The capex number is strong last time also.
No,
The
the
deployment I'm saying
of the
deployment.
Execution of capex.
Execution. This
Correct.
time
Execution is
also,
going to be important.
capex is we're going to spend 15% less than what was budgeted.
So on that base,
you
we
can-
should see a
correct.
good
From
jump up.
11 can go to 12, 12 and a half. But that is
No, I think the highest estimate is 12.
correct. So it can go to 12. But the point is, there is only so much state capacity to deploy. That is essentially the point which many have made. So.
But
if-
I'm asking a bigger question. I'm not diluting or debating the point on capex. I'm saying, is the market's mood different? Capex we say every year. This year, is consumption the big cry? Nimesh?
I don't think so. So from a market point of view, what Nigel said, even I believe. See, there were two reasons why markets was not doing good. One was the liquidity problem, which I think the RBI to some extent is addressed. Maybe further will come in terms of rate cut. The other was the lack of execution in terms of government capex. If the government focuses on that, this is the capex number, and we are going to give a roadmap on the execution part, I think we are done. Markets will cheer, and it will take care of the two big problems which have crippled the markets in the recent memory. So only two things: one, RBI policy, and second,
Let me ask
if they focus on the capex.
the in-house consumption king, because till now this panel is saying it's okay, even if we don't get those personal income tax cuts, as long as capex is there, the market will rise.
I want to add a question.
Yes.
Surabhi, I want to add a question for the consumption king. Ria Shah has written in saying, how much longer will FMCG stocks pinch my portfolio? Mangalam, all yours.
What do you think, Mangalam?
Just a couple of things, Ria. Most important for the budget is that, yes, they can do capex, they can do all of that, but I'll go back to what Parikshit said. It has to be a feel-good budget, nothing else.
Absolutely.
Because from a number standpoint, they can't do much. You're talking about standard deduction, just adding a number to that. From 75,000 emails, that goes up to 1 lakh rupees. That gives you 625 rupees extra per month. What are you going to consume with that? So the only way
More of this?
consumption
Maybe
can
more
be
of this?
more of this, perhaps not. The only way consumption can be pump primed is if you have better job opportunities, you have more, or at best you can pump prime, say something like auto consumption or housing, etc., where people, high ticket items are, sort of incentivized to consume. Low ticket, perhaps not. From an FMCG standpoint, and one of the questions, which is most important from the audience standpoint, and none of them dare to ask it on television, will my cigarettes become expensive?
I was about to this.
So
I was
the
about to
only
tell.
stock to play
On the budget day, watch out for Mangalam.
Exactly.
Talk
The
about
only
ITC.
stock
That's
to
been
play
the
Sorry,
on the budget.
no
high-ticket
sympathy.
item that budget addresses.
No sympathies
sin
there.
items.
No sympathies there.
Absolutely
Even
no
if they
sympathies
do
there. No.
decide to hike taxes there, no sympathies
Shireen, we totally agree.
on that front.
No sympathies on
whatsoever.
that front. No encouragement of smoking. Absolutely, on it from a principal standpoint, but from a portfolio standpoint. And since Ria asked as well, the most important thing, the only stock to play on the budget is ITC. The maximum range available in terms of a high to low in a stock on the budget day is only ITC. So if you had to summarize the budget in just one stock, irrespective of all the numbers that we're talking about, ends up being ITC, because the budget makes or breaks ITC.
And
one thing we're looking at
and I'll just
is
add,
if
add one.
5%, if the overall tax incidence on cigarettes is more than 5%, then it's mild negative. But then if it's below that, then ITC is the stock that you have to look at.
And I'll tell you what, the person who will tell it to you is Mangalam. He's got it spot on. All the last few years, we sit together, so I know that. The
There
minute...
is also, 6 mm, the 15, all that, right?
64 mm, that's
Mangalam
the size.
it's all-
I'll manage that.
I'm telling you, Mangalam, full teetotal or not, he knows, these numbers.
Shireen, can I ask, I just had one question. will we see big changes in customs duty, etc.? I mean, in the budget, is that an expectation? Because because of what's happening,
there are likely to be changes. But the question is there likely to be any preemptive action on duties? Remember, India has been hiking import duties over the last several budgets now. Are we likely to see any move there beyond the correction of inversions and so on and so forth? This is a Trump regime. Trump has gone after India, saying that, look, you better be careful. We will retaliate with tariffs. You need to do more as far as cutting down tariffs is concerned. Is this going to be the budget that does something on tariffs to send out a signal? And Parikshit, you wanted to make a point on that as well.
On tariffs, especially, our priority would be to attract more investments and have a close relationship with US under Trump. Now, a lot of this may happen outside the budget as well. We will be negotiating a trade deal. It's definitely on the table. So we'll see that. And on FDI and attracting more investments, as Nimesh was pointing out, even if there are no new measures, the government in the previous budget had said that we will make moves towards easing the ecosystem for overseas investments. But at the same time, there may be a messaging that we will make the taxation system completely simple. We will decriminalize logs. We'll protect honest taxpayers. Ours is a stable tax regime, and there is policy continuity. There will be the industry hopes that there will be no new laws. The existing ones will be better implemented. So this is the kind of messaging that the industry is hoping for.
No, absolutely. And I think that's the point that's been made here by all of our editors, that the hope certainly is that the government sticks to what it's been doing and what it's been doing well, which is actually doing the heavy lifting as far as infrastructure spending is concerned. That should continue, and that has been driving growth. And hopefully that will provide the kind of consumptive power that everyone's been talking about, provide some relief. The bottom is clearly, the middle and the bottom are hurting at this point in time. What can be done there to alleviate some of the pain? We are likely to see some sweeteners being provided, some relief being provided. That's a given. The quantum, of course, is up for question at this point in time. And finally, I think signaling that, deregulation, ease of doing business, readiness and willingness to integrate with global supply chains, policy continuity, predictability, I think that will be the key messaging that the finance minister will hope to deliver on as she presents. And guys, this is going to be a historic 8th budget for Nirmala Sitharaman, as she stands in Parliament to deliver her 8th consecutive budget. And of course, remember, it is a Saturday, it's a working weekend, the markets are going to be open. And we're going to be open decoding and analyzing the budget, but we have to banter down now. We're completely out of time, but it's been fun. It's been fun chatting.
Shireen, we started the show, you said you all had the biscuits and tea. Well, we got even with you all by the end of it. Biscuits and tea.
That's exactly what the budget is, right? Some get it at the start, some get it at the end. In the end, everyone goes happy, just grabs a biscuit, and maybe that's how we end the banter.
That's what the budget is about. That's what the budget is about. Some start with more in the beginning and some end up with more at the end. And that is certainly going to be the hope that a lot of people will have with the budget this year. But thanks very much, guys. Surbhi, Nigel, Mangalam, Nimesh, Prashant, Timsy, Sapna and Parikshit for joining us here on the Budget Banter. We're going to take a break. Remember to tune in to CNBC TV 18, India's budget headquarters for the last 25 years.